Comm 105, Fall 2015, Persuasion. Up until now, we've talked about the various ways that we use technology in our interpersonal relationships and in education, but how are communication technologies utilized in a business perspective? New technology creates new opportunities for advertising and marketing, for social marketers to use technologies such as social media to influence audiences. Just how can media technologies be used to influence, and what tactics do media marketers use to persuade? For your consideration, what theories explain how we are persuaded by media? How have new media technologies altered our view of these technologies? Are we more easily persuaded by substance or by style? Does it matter? Do you have to believe that you can do something in order to be persuaded to do it? Do emotional appeals affect us? And how can these appeals be made more powerful by new media? In 2012, worldwide spending on internet advertising hit $85 billion. That's 17% of all advertising. Why so social? In Chapter 8, we discussed degrees of separation in social networks. Advertising and persuasive messages can be disseminated through these social networks, and that the products we buy and support can spread through our social networks to hundreds, maybe even thousands of others. Here you can see, again, degrees of separation in terms of the products that we buy and support can affect so many more people in our social networks. How do we think about persuasive messages in the media? We tend to process information in two ways, centrally or peripherally, as described by the elaboration likelihood model. According to this model, when we process centrally, we are paying attention to the information we are being given and carefully, logically considering the arguments. When we process peripherally, we are paying attention to other stimuli outside of the facts and information given. In a beer commercial, what types of information do you pay attention to? The logical information about the ingredients of the beer, or the attractive actress or joke that are included in the commercial? If you're thinking about the merits of beer logically, then you're processing centrally. If you're thinking about how funny the commercial is, then you're processing peripherally. Here you can see the dual processing model. If we're processing centrally, we use high involvement processing, cognitive response, resulting in belief and attitude change, and finally behavior change. If we're processing peripherally, we have low involvement processing, leading to belief change, then behavior change, and possibly at the end, attitude change. Thinking carefully about information leads to longer-term behavioral change because it is preceded by attitude change. When we think critically about a message, we can change our underlying attitudes and, as a result, behave differently. We might be persuaded to behave differently by behavioral cues, but this behavior doesn't involve long-term attitude change, and as such, tends to be short-term. The now famous presidential debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, which was broadcast both on radio and television in 1960, indicates how we process information centrally and peripherally. Listeners who heard the debate believed that Nixon made a stronger argument and was the winner of the debate. In contrast, viewers who watched the televised version believed that Kennedy was the clear winner. How could that be? It could be because Kennedy looked calm and cool during the speech, while Nixon, supposedly recovering from a cold, appeared sweaty and uncomfortable. Viewers of the debate saw Nixon's appearance and evaluated him less favorably than Kennedy. They were paying more attention to peripheral processing cues than they were logical central processing cues. Robert Cialdini identified 6 types of persuasive peripheral cues: reciprocity, social proof, liking, scarcity, authority, and consistency. Reciprocity is the idea that we want to give back when we believe we have received something. Have you ever gotten a coupon for a free gift when you buy a product? The idea is that you have been given something by the company, so you should do them a favor in return. Social proof is simply the idea that everyone is doing it, so you should do it too. If everyone seems to love a product, you might be more likely to buy it. Liking is the idea that we are more likely to be influenced by attractive people or people that we admire than people we don't find attractive or people we don't admire. Scarcity is the buy now while supplies last factor, in that we believe that if we don't act immediately, we will lose our chance to get a product. Authority is our tendency to trust people who are experts. We tend to listen to people in lab coats because we think doctors should be trusted. Doesn't matter whether the person wearing the coat is actually a doctor. Finally, consistency is our tendency to want to stay true to our commitments. If we commit to buying one product from a company, we may be more likely to buy more products from them because we have in the past. The heuristic semantic model is similar to elaboration likelihood, but suggests that we process peripherally because we cannot or do not want to take the time and energy needed to process a message logically. We don't have the mental ability to think critically about each and every message every second of every day. Using peripheral cues says nothing about our intelligence, but is a normal way that we process information to keep ourselves from being overloaded with just too much of it. Because we can't think deeply all the time, we use heuristics, cognitive shortcuts. Heuristics allow us to respond quickly without having to stop and think about every message we receive. Like peripheral cues, decisions reached using heuristics can be short-term, but when it comes to which brand of snacks you buy on a given trip to the supermarket, how important are long-term attitude changes compared to short-term heuristics when it comes to what you buy? After receiving a persuasive message, how do we decide what to do with it? Theory of reasoned action is a model of persuasion that suggests that messages influence attitudes and subjective norms, which in turn influence behavioral intentions. Behavioral intentions then, again in turn, lead to behavioral change. This model is concerned with whether or not we want to change our behavior in the future. What do we intend to do? Quitting smoking, for example, not only involves the belief that smoking is bad for you, but also the behavioral intention to quit. A smoker probably needs to do more than just want to quit and intend to quit, though. He or she should also believe that they can quit, that they have the ability to. The theory of planned behavior accounts for ability, called self-efficacy. That is, this model predicts that we need to intend to change our behavior, and that also we must believe that we have the capacity to change our behavior in order to actually change it. We need to believe we can do it before we can. Can you think of a time when our intentions would not match up with our behaviors? Going back to the example of the smoker, could it be that he or she wants to quit, and even believes in his or her ability, yet still continues to smoke? It could be possible that you intend to do something, that you believe you can do something, and yet still not do it. Yelp reviews matter. Researchers from the University of California at Berkeley, Anderson and Magruder 2012, have found that increasing a restaurant's ratings by only 1/2 of a star out of a 5-star system can help them sell nearly 33% more frequently. Word of mouth can be a powerful tool. We tend to listen to opinion leaders, people who influence others using word of mouth, to help form our own opinions. Have you ever made a decision to buy or to not buy a product based on the reviews of people that you don't actually know online? How else do we look to the media to change our behavior? As mentioned in Chapter 6, we can model behaviors by watching others. This is Bandura's social learning / social cognitive theory. It's a key in terms of how we learn by observation. Here is Bandura's model. He outlined 4 components of vicarious learning, that is, learning through observation. They are attention, retention, motor reproduction, and motivation. Attention means we're focusing on the stimulus. We're actually paying attention to what we're watching. Retention means we're putting that information that we gained from viewing the stimulus into our memories for further use, saving it for later. Motor reproductions mean we can physically reproduce the observed behavior. If you can't physically do something, how could you possibly reproduce it? Finally, motivation means we have some reason for modeling the behavior. Why would we want to do this? We must get something out of it or gain something in return. In Chapter 5, you learned about exemplification theory, which argues that we use media portrayals as exemplars to make judgments about the real world. We look at the media to provide us with information about how the world works. As such, exemplars can be persuasive because they affect how we form judgments. We might use more arousing information that serves as an exemplar in our memories than more detailed, logical, but less interesting information. Can you think of facts or figures that you've learned in the past, and for whatever reason, you just can't seem to forget? That's an exemplar. The serious video game Darfur is Dying was mentioned in Chapter 6. It's a game in which the player embodies a displaced refugee in Darfur, and is tasked with obtaining fresh water for other refugees. Although the game has been criticized for doing little to help the conflict itself, the game could serve as an exemplar of the experiences of a refugee and help to enact attitude change. From April 2006 to April 2007, over 1.2 million individuals have relived the Darfur conflict, or at least a virtual version of it, nearly 2.4 million times. Think about how many people have gotten to experience that exemplar, and how that could potentially affect their own lives and how they view the conflict. Chapter Summary. In Persuasion, individuals do not always pay attention to the most important or core aspects of a message, as we discussed with the elaboration likelihood model. But this might not always be the goal of the persuader. Sometimes, all that they want is to enact short-term behavioral change. Peripheral cues are more than enough to enact this change, not so much true long-term attitude change. Technologies allow for exposure to a greater variety of messages, as well as more message involvement via interactivity. Questions for the crowd. Can you think of commercials or other persuasive messages that are particularly good or particularly bad at persuasion? What theoretical principles do they or don't they follow? Play a session of Darfur is Dying and share your experiences with us. What do you remember about the conflict after playing? How did playing the game make you feel? Share your answers to these questions on Twitter using the hashtag #MediaAsTool hashtag or in our official Facebook group linked below. You might even get an answer from the authors directly.